You think you can just walk away from this? You listen to me.
Sir!
Hey, knock it off!
Hey, stand down!
An elite sniper humiliated her in the mess hall. The truth about her cost him his career. The mess hall at Fort Bragg was packed that Friday afternoon. The clatter of metal trays, animated conversations, and laughter echoed off the gray walls. It was the sacred moment where soldiers from E1 different units mingled, sharing stories of training and missions. Sergeant Rachel Torres gripped her tray firmly, her eyes scanning the tables for an empty seat. She was 32 years old, brown hair pulled back in an impeccable military bun, and a uniform that looked like it had been pressed with surgical precision. Nothing in her appearance suggested weakness, but in the eyes of many there, she was just another woman trying to prove something in a man's world. "Watch out, guys!" A loud voice cut through the chatter. "Make room for the lady to pass. We don't want her breaking a nail carrying that heavy tray." Laughter erupted from a table in the left corner. Rachel slowly turned her head toward the voice. There he was, Sergeant Daniel Cross, considered one of the best elite snipers in Special Forces. He was leaning back in his chair, an arrogant smile plastered across his tanned face. Surrounded by his special operations team, his blue eyes sparkled with cruel amusement. Cross was a living legend. 2 bronze stars, 1 silver star, countless classified missions in the Middle East. His long-distance shooting record was studied in military academies. He knew exactly who he was and how much power his name carried. Rachel stopped. For a moment, the entire mess hall seemed to freeze. She could ignore it like she always did. She could simply find another seat and let it pass. But something in his tone, in the others' laughter, in the pitying looks of some soldiers around, something inside her snapped. "Is there a problem, Sergeant Cross?" Her voice was calm but sharp as a blade. Cross leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, his smile widening. "No problem, Torres. Just wondering what a—" He paused dramatically. "Administrative instructor is doing wearing. The same insignia as real operators. You know, people who actually see combat." More laughter. Some soldiers looked away, uncomfortable. Others grabbed their phones, sensing something big was about to happen. Rachel took 3 steps toward Cross's table. Her posture was relaxed, but there was something in the way she moved that made his smile falter for a split second. "Administrative instructor?" she repeated, her voice dangerously soft. "Is that how you see me? That's what your record says, isn't it?" Cross looked at his table mates, seeking validation. "Recruit training, personnel, management desk work. Nothing against that, but it's not exactly jumping out of helicopters into hostile territory, is it?" He paused, letting his words sink in, feeding off the attention. The mess hall had grown quieter now, more people tuning into the confrontation. "You know what your problem is, Torres?" Cross continued, emboldened by the audience. "You wear that uniform like you've earned it the hard way. But we all know there are different paths. Some of us earn our stripes in the sand and blood. Others," he gestured vaguely at her, "earn them in climate-controlled offices. Filing reports." His team snickered. One of them, a younger corporal with a fresh crew cut, added fuel to the fire. "Hey, Sarge, didn't she get some kind of commendation for, what was it, improving the filing system?" The table exploded in laughter. Rachel stood perfectly still. Her tray remained steady in her hands, not even a tremor. But her eyes had changed. They were no longer the eyes of someone absorbing an insult. They were the eyes of a predator calculating distance, wind speed, and target acquisition. "Sergeant Cross," she said, her voice cutting through the laughter, like a suppressed rifle shot. "I have a proposition for you." The laughter died down. Cross raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "A proposition. This should be good." Rachel set her tray down on the nearest table with deliberate care. She turned to face him fully, her hands clasped behind her back in a perfect parade rest position. "Tomorrow morning, 0600 hours, the long-range qualification course, you and me, we settle this question of who's earned what." The mess hall went dead silent. Every eye was now on the 2 sergeants. Cross's smile widened into something predatory. "You want a challenge?" "Me? To a shooting competition? He laughed, looking around in disbelief. Torres, I don't think you understand. I hold the base record. Hell, I hold records at 3 different bases. I've made confirmed kills at distances you probably can't even calculate. Then you should have no problem. Accepting, Rachel replied evenly. Unless the great Daniel Cross is afraid of losing to an administrative instructor. The challenge hung in the air like cordite smoke. Cross's smile flickered. He couldn't back down now, not in front of half the base, not with his reputation on the line. To refuse would be to admit fear, and fear was not something a man like Daniel Cross could afford to show. You're on, he said, standing up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. But let's make this interesting. When I win, you apologize publicly, right here in this mess hall, and admit that some people are built for combat and others are built for paperwork. Rachel didn't blink. And when I win, you spend the next month training female recruits, teaching them everything you know about marksmanship. No complaints, no shortcuts, full respect. Cross snorted. Deal. But you're going to need more than confidence, Torres. You're going to need a miracle. As Rachel picked up her tray and walked away, the mess hall erupted into chaos. Phones were out, texts flying. By dinner time, the entire base knew about the challenge. Betting pools started forming in barracks. The odds were heavily in Cross's favor. Some bookies were offering 20-1 against Torres. That night, in the female officers' quarters, Rachel sat on her bunk, staring at a worn photograph in her hands. It showed a much younger version of herself, face painted in camouflage, standing in desert terrain next to an M40 sniper rifle. Behind her, barely visible, was a sign in Arabic. The photo was stamped with a date, March 2011, Fallujah. Her roommate, Lieutenant Jessica Kim, sat across from her, concern etched on her face. Rachel, what are you doing? Cross isn't just good. He's legendary. Why put yourself through this? Humiliation. Rachel didn't look up from the photograph. Because I'm tired, Jess, tired of being invisible, tired of having my record classified to the point where people like Cross think I'm a secretary in uniform. You could just tell him the truth. Show him your real service record. It's classified for a reason, Rachel said quietly. National security, ongoing operations, protected identities. You know how it works. My entire combat history is redacted. Officially, I've never left U.S. soil. Jessica leaned forward. Then why accept his challenge? You have nothing to prove, Rachel. Finally looked up, and Jessica saw something in her eyes that made her shiver. A darkness, a weight of things seen and done that no amount of paperwork could hide. Maybe I don't need to prove it to them, Rachel said softly. Maybe I need to prove it to myself, that I'm still her, the person in that photo, that 3 years behind a desk hasn't erased everything I learned in the field. At 5:45 hours, the long-range qualification course was already surrounded by spectators. Word had spread beyond Fort Bragg. Officers from neighboring bases, instructors, even a few civilian contractors had shown up. This wasn't just a competition anymore. It was a spectacle. Sergeant Cross arrived at exactly 05:50, flanked by his entire team. He wore his full combat gear, his custom rifle case carried with the reverence of a knight bearing a holy sword. He worked the crowd like a politician, shaking, hands accepting pats on the back, soaking in the attention. At 05:55, Rachel Torres appeared. She walked alone, carrying a standard-issue M24 rifle case, wearing simple range gear. No entourage, no fanfare. She moved through the crowd like a ghost, barely acknowledged. Major William Harper, the Rangemaster, stood between them holding a clipboard. He was a grizzled veteran with more years in service than both of them combined. He looked distinctly uncomfortable with the circus this had become. All right, listen up. Harper's voice boomed across the range. This is still a military, installation, not a damn reality show. We're going to run a standard qualification course, 5 shots at 300 yards, 5 at 500, 5 at 800, and 3 at 1,000. Highest combined score wins. We do this by the book. He looked directly at Cross, then at Rachel. "This is about marksmanship. Nothing else. We clear?" Both sergeants nodded. "Sergeant Cross, you're up first." Cross stepped to the firing line with the confidence of a man who had done this 1,000 times. He assembled his rifle with practiced ease, a custom Remington 700 with modifications worth more than most soldiers' annual salary. The scope alone cost $3,000. He settled into position, and the crowd fell silent. Even those who had come to watch Rachel fail had to respect the master at work. The first shot rang out. Harper checked the target through binoculars. Center mass, 10 points. 4 more shots. 4 more. Perfect scores. 50 out of 50 at 300 yards. Cross moved to the 500-yard line. Again, 5 shots, 5 perfect scores. The crowd murmured in awe. This wasn't just skill. This was artistry. At 800 yards, Cross finally dropped a point, his 4th shot landing just outside the bullseye. 9 points. Harper called. Cross's jaw tightened, but he finished strong. 49 out of 50. At 1,000 yards, the wind had picked up. This was where legends were made or broken. Cross took his time, adjusting for wind, elevation, even the rotation of the earth. His first shot hit, 10 points. The crowd erupted. His second shot hit, 10 points. The cheering was deafening. His final shot. Cross hesitated. Something was off. The wind had shifted slightly. He adjusted, breathed, squeezed. The shot rang out. Harper took a long look through the binoculars. 9 points. Edge of the ring. Still, Cross stood up. With a total score of 147 out of 150. The crowd went wild. It was a near-perfect score, better than 99% of qualified snipers could achieve. Cross raised his arms in premature victory, accepting congratulations from his team. Major Harper's voice cut through the celebration. "Sergeant Torres, you're..." Rachel approached the line, and the crowd noise died to whispers and scattered chuckles. She opened her case and pulled out a standard M24. No modifications, no custom parts, just the rifle every designated marksman was issued. Cross watched from the side, arms crossed, that arrogant smile back on his face. "Hope you brought your reading glasses, Torres." Someone in the crowd laughed. Rachel didn't respond. She settled into position behind the rifle with a fluidity that made Major Harper's eyebrows rise slightly. Her body seemed to melt into the weapon, becoming one with it. There was no tension, no wasted movement, just perfect practiced stillness. The 300-yard target seemed almost insulting to her. She didn't rush, but she didn't hesitate either. 5 shots in smooth succession, each separated by exactly 3 seconds. The rhythm was hypnotic. 50 points, Harper called out. His voice neutral, but his eyes sharp with new interest. Perfect score at 300. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd, but most dismissed it. 300 yards was easy for any competent shooter. The real test was still coming. Rachel moved to the 500-yard line. Again, that same fluid motion settling in, becoming still. But this time something different happened. A gust of wind swept across the range, strong enough to make flags snap and pop. Cross smiled. Nature was doing his work for him. Rachel didn't fire. She waited, her finger resting alongside the trigger guard, not on the trigger itself. 10 seconds. 20. 30. The crowd grew restless. "Is she choking?" someone whispered loudly. Then, in the space between one heartbeat and the next, the wind died. Rachel fired 5 shots in rapid succession, faster than at 300 yards, each shot flowing into the next like a single, extended exhale. Harper looked through his binoculars for a long moment. When he lowered them, his expression had changed completely. 50 points, perfect score at 500. The laughter in the crowd died. Cross's smile faded slightly. A perfect score at 500 yards in shifting wind wasn't luck. That was skill. At the 800-yard line, Rachel's demeanor shifted again. She took longer to settle in, making minute adjustments to her position. The distance was significant now. The bullet would drop considerably. Wind drift became a major factor, even humidity played a role. She fired. Harper checked. 10 points. She fired again. 10 points. Third shot. 10 points. The crowd was silent now, watching with genuine attention. Even Cross had stopped smiling, his arms dropping to his sides, his analytical mind engaging with what he was witnessing. Fourth shot. Rachel paused longer this time. A full minute passed. The wind was swirling, unpredictable. She made a tiny adjustment to her scope. She fired. 10 points. One shot left at 800 yards. Rachel chambered the round with the same mechanical precision. But before she settled in, she did something unexpected. She closed her eyes for 3 full seconds, taking a deep breath that seemed to come from somewhere beyond the present moment. When she opened them, something had changed in her expression. The mask of the administrative instructor had completely fallen away. What remained was something harder, colder, forged in places where hesitation meant death. She fired. 10 points. Harper's voice carried a note of respect now. Perfect score at 800 yards. Sergeant Torres, that's 150 points. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. She had already matched Cross's total score, and she still had the 1,000-yard shots remaining. Cross's face had gone pale, his confidence cracking like thin ice. Rachel stood and walked to the 1,000-yard line. At this distance, the target looked impossibly small, barely visible even through the scope. The wind had picked up again, gusting unpredictably. The morning sun was rising, creating heat shimmer that distorted the air. These were nightmare conditions for precision shooting. Major Harper walked over to her, speaking quietly enough that only she could hear. "Sergeant, I need to know something before you continue. Where did you really learn to shoot like this?" Rachel looked at him and for just a moment let him see past the carefully maintained cover story. "The same place you learned to ask questions without expecting answers, sir." Harper held her gaze, then nodded slowly. He'd spent enough years in classified operations to recognize a kindred spirit. "Carry on, Sergeant," Rachel returned. To her position, the crowd had swelled to over 200 people now. Even base personnel who had no stake in the competition had come to witness what was becoming legendary. Her first shot at 1,000 yards took nearly 2 minutes to prepare. She was calculating factors that most shooters never even considered. The Coriolis effect from Earth's rotation, the slight difference in air pressure between her position and the target, even the cant of her rifle down to a fraction of a degree. She fired. The second of silence before Harper's call felt like an eternity. 10 points. Center mass. The crowd erupted. Cross's face was now completely drained of color. His teammates were silent, their earlier bravado evaporated. Second shot at 1,000 yards. Rachel's preparation was faster this time, her body having memorized the calculations. She fired. 10 points. 2 for 2 at 1,000 yards. The crowd was going insane. People were climbing on barriers to get a better view. Cell phones were recording from every angle. Rachel had 1 shot remaining. If she hit it, she would achieve a perfect 165 out of 165. A score that had never been recorded in Fort Bragg's history. Not by Cross, not by visiting Olympic shooters, not by anyone. But something happened that changed everything. As Rachel settled in for her final shot, a young corporal pushed through the crowd, running toward Major Harper with a tablet in his hands. His face was urgent, almost panicked. "Sir! Major Harper, sir! You need to see this right now." Harper turned, annoyed at the interruption. "Corporal, we're in the middle of—" "Sir, it's about Sergeant Torres. Her security clearance just got flagged in the system. There's been a request from JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command. They're demanding to know who authorized her to discharge a weapon on a public range." The tablet screen showed a classified document with so many redaction bars, it looked like a black rectangle with occasional words peeking through. But one phrase was clearly visible in red text. Operational security breach. Immediate. Containment required. Harper's face went from annoyed to deadly serious in an instant. He grabbed the tablet, his eyes scanning the document. Around them, the crowd sensed something was wrong. The festive atmosphere began to curdle into confusion and tension. Cross saw his opportunity. He stepped forward, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "What's going on? Is there a problem with Torres's credentials? I knew something was off about her." Rachel remained in position behind her rifle, but her jaw tightened. She knew exactly what was happening. Someone in the intelligence community had been monitoring the base network, saw her name flagged in connection with a public shooting demonstration, and hit the panic button. Harper looked up from the tablet, then at Rachel, then at the crowd of over 200 witnesses now filming everything on their phones. "Sergeant Torres, I need you to step away from the weapon immediately." The crowd exploded with noise. Cross's smile returned, triumphant and vicious. "She's a fraud. I knew it. Probably lied about her qualifications." Rachel stood slowly, her hands visible, moving with the careful precision of someone who'd been in this exact situation before. She walked toward Harper, her voice low and urgent. "Sir, you need to clear this range. Right now, before someone makes this worse than it already is." But it was too late. A black SUV with government plates came speeding through the base gates, heading directly toward the range. Behind it, 2 more vehicles. They weren't military police, they were something else entirely. The SUVs skidded to a stop, and 6 men in civilian clothes but with obvious military bearing stepped out. The lead man was in his 50s, gray hair, sharp eyes, wearing a suit that screamed federal government. He had an ID badge clipped to his belt that made Harper's face go white. "I'm Deputy Director Marcus Chen, Defense Intelligence Agency," the man announced, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "This range is now under federal jurisdiction. Everyone not directly involved in this exercise needs to leave. Now." Nobody moved. The crowd was too confused, too invested in the drama. Chen's expression hardened. "That wasn't a request. Base commander, clear this area or I'll have the military police do it for you." Harper grabbed his radio, but before he could speak, Cross stepped forward, his ego overriding his survival instincts. "Hold on just a damn minute. I'm Sergeant Daniel Cross, Special Operations, and I demand to know what's going on. This woman challenged me, and now you're shutting us down because what? She can't handle losing? This is bullshit." Chen turned to look at Cross with the expression of a man who'd seen and handled bigger problems than an arrogant sniper before breakfast. "Sergeant Cross, I strongly suggest you stop talking and start walking. This doesn't concern you. Like hell it doesn't. My reputation is on the line." "Here," Rachel finally spoke, her voice quiet but carrying. "Daniel, please, just go." Cross spun to face her, his anger boiling over. "You don't get to tell me what to do, Torres. You're a fake. Whatever classified bullshit you're hiding behind, it doesn't change the fact that you're not a real." "Operator, you're not—" "Sergeant Cross," Chen's voice cracked like a whip. "You're currently in violation of about 6 different federal statutes regarding classified information. I can have you in a federal holding cell within the hour. Is that really how you want this day to go?" For the first, time, genuine fear flickered across Cross's face. Around him, his team was already backing away, their self-preservation instincts sharper than his. Chen turned to his team. "Clear the range. Everyone without top-secret clearance out. That includes you, Sergeant Cross." As military police finally arrived and began herding the protesting crowd away, Cross stood frozen, watching as everything he thought he knew shattered around him. Rachel remained still, her face expressionless, as Chen approached her. "Phantom," Chen said quietly, using a name that made Rachel's eyes close briefly in resignation. "What the hell were you thinking?" "I was thinking I'm tired of being invisible, sir." "You're invisible for a reason. You're supposed to be invisible. That's the whole goddamn point." Within 20 minutes, the range was empty except for Chen's team, Harper, Rachel, and, because he'd refused to leave and had credentials Chen couldn't dismiss, Sergeant Cross. Chen pulled out a tablet and thrust it toward Cross. "You want to know who Rachel Torres really is? You want to know what she's done? Fine. Sign this NDA first, Because once you see this, you can never speak about it. Not to your team, not to your family, not to anyone. You violate that, and you won't just lose your career, you'll spend the next decade in Leavenworth. Cross's hand shook slightly as he signed the digital document. His bravado was completely gone now, replaced by a growing sense of dread. Chen pulled up a file. It was heavily redacted, but what remained was devastating. Sergeant Rachel Torres, codename Phantom, attached to Ground Branch, Special Activities Division 2009 to 2018. 43 confirmed eliminations in theater, operated in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, and 3 countries whose names are still classified. Cross's face went gray as Chen scrolled through after-action reports, each one a nightmare of redacted horror. Fallujah, 2011. Torres provided overwatch for a hostage rescue operation. 8 insurgents eliminated in under 90 seconds, including a shot at 1,247 meters. Through a sandstorm. Aleppo, 2014. Torres was the primary sniper for the extraction of a CIA operative from a compromised safe house. 12 hostiles eliminated, 0 friendly casualties. Mosul, 2016. Chen paused, his voice dropping. This one's still classified, but I'll tell you this much. Torres spent 4 days in a hide position, alone, with no resupply in 120-degree heat, to eliminate a high-value target. The shot was made at 1,420 meters in a crosswind. The target was surrounded by civilians. She waited 72 hours for a 3-second window where no innocents would be in. The line of fire. Cross felt his legs weaken. He reached for a nearby bench and sat down heavily, his face ashen. Everything he'd said, every insult, every mocking comment played back in his mind with horrifying clarity. Chen wasn't finished. He pulled up a photograph on the tablet, a grainy satellite image of a destroyed building in what looked like a Middle Eastern city. You know what this is, Cross? This was an ISIS command center in Raqqa, 2017. Intelligence indicated they were planning a chemical weapons attack on a civilian population center. We had a 48-hour window to stop it. Torres went in alone. Alone because the risk was too high to send a full team. She spent 36 hours in that building, gathering intelligence, and when her position was compromised, she held off 24 fighters long enough to transmit the data that prevented the attack. Chen zoomed. On a section of rubble. She was extracted with 3 gunshot wounds, a collapsed lung, and a concussion. She refused medical evacuation until the data was verified. Doctors said she should have died twice, once from blood loss, once from the lung injury. She walked out of that hospital 3 weeks later and volunteered for another mission. Harper, who had been silent throughout, finally spoke. Jesus Christ, and we have her teaching admin recruits? She's teaching admin recruits because her face was burned by every hostile intelligence service in the Middle East, Chen said flatly. ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Syrian intelligence, they all have her photo, her biometrics, everything. She can't operate overseas anymore without risking immediate compromise. So we brought her home, gave her a cover identity, and hoped she could fade into a normal life. Chen turned his cold gaze back to Cross. But apparently, fading into a normal life is hard when people like you decide she hasn't earned her place. Cross couldn't speak. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly. All his accomplishments, his records, his legendary status, it all felt like children playing pretend compared to what he'd just learned. Rachel stood motionless, her eyes fixed on some distant point. This was her nightmare. Her real life exposed, her carefully constructed cover shredded, all because she'd let pride override judgment. Chen sighed heavily. Phantom, Torres, you understand what this means. Your cover here is blown. We'll have to transfer you, create a new identity, start over somewhere else. Again. I know, sir, Rachel said quietly. Was it worth it? Was putting Cross in his place worth throwing away 3 years of building a stable life? Rachel looked at Cross, who couldn't meet her eyes. She thought about all the subtle insults, the casual dismissals, the way people looked through her instead of at her. The loneliness of carrying secrets that made her a ghost in her own uniform. I don't know, sir, Ask me in a year. Chen shook his head. You're dismissed, Torres. Go pack. You'll be on transport to Virginia by tomorrow morning. We'll decide what to do with you there. Rachel saluted, performed a perfect about-face, and walked away. As she passed Cross, she stopped for just a moment. For what it's worth, Sergeant, you're a good shooter. Top 5% easily. You should be proud of that. Her voice carried no anger, no triumph, just a weary honesty. But being a good shooter and being a warrior are different things. One is about skill, the other is about sacrifice. You've got the skill, but you've never had to sacrifice who you are, give up your name, your history, your identity to do the job. I hope you never have to. She walked away, leaving Cross sitting on the bench, his world in ruins. Chen turned to Harper. Major, you never saw those files. This conversation never happened. Sergeant Cross was never here. Understood? Harper nodded stiffly. Understood, sir. Chen approached Cross, who finally looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. Sergeant Cross, you signed an NDA. But more than that, you now carry a burden. You know the truth about someone extraordinary, and you can never speak about it. You humiliated a genuine American hero in front of hundreds of people, and there's nothing you can do to take it back publicly. You'll have to live with that. Sir, Cross's voice cracked. I didn't know. How could I have known? You couldn't have, Chen admitted. That's the whole point of a cover identity. But you made assumptions. You saw a woman in uniform and decided she hadn't earned it. You saw someone quiet and mistook it for weakness. That's on you. Chen leaned in closer. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to go back to your unit. You're going to continue being the excellent sniper that you are. But you're going to remember this day. And the next time you see someone you think hasn't earned their place, you're going to remember that some of the most dangerous people in the world look like librarians. 3 days later, Sergeant Daniel Cross walked into the Fort Bragg Training Center for female recruits. He was carrying his rifle case and a training manual. The female recruits looked at him with suspicion. They'd all heard about the mess hall incident, the challenge, the mysterious shutdown of the range. The lead instructor, a hard-faced female gunnery sergeant, approached him. Sergeant Cross, I was told you volunteered to assist with advanced marksmanship training for the next month. That true? Cross set down his rifle case carefully. Yes, gunnery sergeant, it is. Interesting. Last week you didn't think women belonged in combat roles. What changed? Cross met her eyes. For the first time in his career, there was no arrogance, no bravado, just a humility born of having his entire worldview shattered. I met someone who taught me that I don't know everything, gunnery sergeant, and that the most dangerous assumption a soldier can make is thinking they can judge another warrior by their appearance. The gunnery sergeant studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Fair enough. You can start with the 500-yard fundamentals. And Cross, these women don't need you to go easy on them. They need you to teach them everything you know. Can you do that? Yes, gunnery sergeant. I can. As Cross began setting up the training equipment, one of the recruits, a young private named Martinez, approached hesitantly. Sergeant Cross, is it true you got beat by a female instructor? The rumor is she shot perfect at 1,000 yards. Cross paused, his hand stilling on the rifle case. Old him would have deflected, made an excuse, changed the subject. But Chen's words echoed in his mind. You'll have to live with that. He turned to face Martinez and the other recruits who had gathered, their young faces filled with curiosity and challenge. Private Martinez, I didn't just get beat. I got destroyed by someone operating on a level I didn't even know existed. He took a breath. And yes, she shot perfectly at 1,000 yards, in shifting wind, with a standard-issue rifle, under conditions that would make most snipers pack up and go home. The recruits exchanged glances. This wasn't what they'd expected. But here's what you really need to know, Cross continued, his voice stronger now. I spent years thinking I was at the top. I had the records, the medals, the reputation, and I let that make me arrogant. I looked at someone who didn't fit my narrow definition of what an elite operator should look like, and I dismissed her. I humiliated her publicly, and I was wrong. He opened his rifle case, pulling out his custom weapon with reverent care. This rifle cost me $12,000. Custom everything. I can tell you the ballistic coefficient of every round I fire. I know the exact minute of angle adjustment for every 100 yards out to 2,000 meters. I'm technically perfect. Cross set the rifle down and looked each recruit in the eye. And it didn't matter, because technical perfection without wisdom, without respect, without understanding that there are people out there who've done things I can't even imagine. That's just expensive mediocrity. Private Martinez spoke up, her voice uncertain. Sergeant, who was she? The instructor who beat you? Cross felt the weight of the NDA, the federal threats, the classified files. But he could give them something without breaking his oath. Someone who sacrificed more than I ever have. Someone who gave up everything, her identity, her recognition, her chance at a normal life, to keep people safe. People like you, like me, like everyone on this base who'll never know her name or what she did. He picked up a standard M24 rifle, identical to the one Rachel had used. This is what she used. No modifications, no custom parts, just skill, discipline, and experience earned in places where one mistake means you don't come home. He handed the rifle to Martinez. Your job over the next month is to learn that equipment doesn't make the shooter. Character does, sacrifice does, and respect for yourself, for your weapon, and for every person who puts on this uniform does. The training began in earnest. Over the following weeks, something changed in Daniel Cross. The swagger diminished. The arrogance faded. He taught with a patience and thoroughness he'd never shown before. When recruits struggled, he didn't mock. He adjusted his teaching. When they succeeded, he praised them genuinely. But every night, alone in his quarters, Cross pulled up news feeds from the Middle East. He studied reports of operations, of battles, of the ongoing war against terrorism. And he wondered which of those unnamed successes, those classified operations, those unknown operatives mentioned in redacted reports, had been Rachel Torres. 6 weeks after the incident, Cross received an unmarked envelope in his base mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single photograph printed on standard paper. It showed a desert landscape at sunset, a sniper hide position barely visible in the rocks. Written on the back in clean, precise handwriting were 4 words. Skill fades. Character endures. There was no signature. There didn't need to be. Cross kept that photograph in his pocket every day. It became his reminder, his penance, his lesson. 2 months later, a new recruit cycle was beginning. Cross was in the mess hall eating alone when he noticed a group of male soldiers at a nearby table. They were laughing, making crude comments about a female officer walking past, a young lieutenant carrying a heavy equipment case. Hey, sweetheart, need some help with that? Wouldn't want you to break a nail. The laughter was ugly, familiar. Cross felt something ignite in his chest. He stood up, walked over to their table, and the temperature in the immediate area seemed to drop 10 degrees. You gentlemen have something to say? His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of hard-earned authority. The soldiers looked up, saw his rank, his record, his reputation. The laughter died. It was just a joke, Sergeant. You didn't mean to disrespect a commissioned officer? You didn't mean to judge someone based on their gender rather than their ability? You didn't mean to act like the kind of soldiers who bring shame to this uniform? One of them, bolder or stupider than the rest, spoke up. Come on, Sarge. It's not like she's seen real combat, she's just... Cross leaned down, his face inches from the soldiers. You don't know what she's seen. You don't know what she's done. You don't know what she's sacrificed. And the truly dangerous part, the really elite operators, the ones who've done things that would give you nightmares, they're the ones you'll never recognize, because they're too professional, too disciplined, too dedicated to their mission to care about your respect. He straightened up, his voice rising slightly so nearby. Tables could hear. I learned something recently. I learned it the hard way, the humiliating way, the way that costs you sleep and makes you question everything you thought you knew. The most dangerous warriors don't announce themselves. They don't need to. And when you mock them, when you dismiss them, when you judge them by anything other than their actions, you're not insulting them. You're exposing your own ignorance. The mess hall had gone quiet. Cross looked around at the watching faces. That lieutenant you just disrespected? Maybe she's admin. Maybe she's never seen combat. Or maybe... He paused, letting the weight settle. Maybe she's someone who's done things you couldn't handle, seen things you couldn't process, and sacrificed things you couldn't imagine. And you'll never know. Because that's what professionalism looks like. He turned back to the soldiers at the table. You will apologize to that lieutenant. You will do it now, and you will do it sincerely. And then you will spend the next month volunteering in whatever capacity she requires. Do I make myself clear? Yes, Sergeant, they mumbled, scrambling to their feet. As they hurried off to find the lieutenant, the soldier who'd been sitting next to Cross at his original table spoke up. Damn, Cross. When did you become such a champion for women in the military? Cross sat back down, picking up his tray. The photograph in his pocket seemed to burn against his chest. When I learned that some lessons cost you everything you thought you were, and give you back something better, something real. Far away, in a small apartment in Virginia, Rachel Torres sat at a window drinking coffee and watching the sunrise. Her new identity was in place. Her new assignment was waiting. She would fade into invisibility again, become another face in the crowd, another administrative nobody. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, routed through so many encrypted servers that tracing it would be impossible. You were right. Sacrifice is what defines us. Some of us are learning that. Thank you, DC. Rachel stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. No trace, no record, no evidence. That was her life now. But she smiled. Small and brief, but genuine. Maybe the humiliation, the exposure, the cost, maybe it had been worth it after all. Not because she'd proven anything to Cross, but because she'd reminded him, and perhaps others, that heroes don't always look the way we expect them to. And sometimes, the quiet ones, the invisible ones, the ones we overlook, are the ones who've earned their place in ways we'll never fully understand. Rachel Torres sat down. Her coffee, picked up her new identity packet, and prepared to disappear again. Because that's what real warriors do. They sacrifice everything, including recognition, including glory, including their own names. And they do it without complaint, without expectation of thanks, without needing anyone to know. The most dangerous warriors walk among us unrecognized, to honor those who serve in silence, whose sacrifices remain classified, whose names we'll never know. Remember that heroism doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it wears the face of the person you overlooked, dismissed, or underestimated. Respect is earned in the shadows, and true warriors need no audience.